أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله
لا إله إلا الله. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله ولتنظر نفس ما قدمت لغد واتقوا الله إن الله خبير بما تعملون. Brothers and sisters in Iman, a few ahadith emphasizing the merits of fasting the month of Ramadan. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam states that the faster rejoices twice. The fasting person will have two moments of happiness, two moments of joy. One is at the time of breaking his fast, and the other when he meets his Lord. So one is the joy that a person feels at the time of breaking the fast. They have accomplished the fasting of a day. Or it is the joy that a person feels upon the celebration of the Eid al-Fitr, that we all feel satisfied that we have completed the fast of the month of Ramadan. So this is one joy. But the second, which is more important, is the joy that a person will feel when meeting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and realizing the reward that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grants for the fasting person. In another hadith, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, whoever fasts a day for the sake of Allah, whoever fasts a day for the sake of Allah, Allah will remove him from hellfire for a distance covered in 70 years. Whoever fasts a day for Allah. He did not say whoever fasts a day for Allah. And so fasting for Allah entails that a person makes the intention, but also that a person is obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala throughout the fasting day. So they're staying away from sin. They're fulfilling all of their obligations. And if sin does happen or occur, then they seek forgiveness from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so it is fasting as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala expects of us. What is the reward? For each day Allah will put a distance between us and hellfire of 70 years travel. A third hadith, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, there is a gate in paradise called Ar-Rayyan, through which only fasters will enter on the day of judgment. It will be said, where are the fasters? Where are the people who fasted in this day? And so these are not only the people who only fasted the month of Ramadan, but fasted Ramadan and voluntary fasts. And so we know that the sunnah is to fast 6 days of Shawwal, because Ramadan is 30 days multiplied by 10, the reward of fasting 300 days. And then multiplied a further 6 days multiplied by 10, 360 days. The lunar year is around 355, 360 days. And so what happens is that a person gets the reward of fasting the entire year. And then if a person fasts 3 days of every month, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will grant them the reward of fasting the entire year. And then there is also the sunnah of fasting, the day of Arafah, the day of Ashura, Muharram, the 10th of Muharram, alongside the 9th or 11th. And then the first 10 days or 9 days of Dhul Hijjah, recommended time of fasting. And so these fasting people who sacrifice their desires for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that on the day of Qiyamah they will have a specified gate in paradise known as Ar-Rayyan, that it will be said, where are the fasters? They will then enter through this gate. When the last of them enters, the gate will close and no one else will pass through it. It is also pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam stated, by He in whose hands is my soul, the smell of a faster's mouth is sweeter to Allah the Almighty than the smell of musk. So this is obviously a metaphor. Not that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala smells, or that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala enjoys fragrance, but it is pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to see a human being give up food and drink, the things that are most essential to one's life, and to go through some pain, going through the pangs of hunger. And so this is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accepts a dua every day of Ramadan. The dua of the fasting person is accepted by Allah, because you are going through such extent of sacrifice that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wishes to reward you by granting you what you ask for, because you have fulfilled your side of the bargain. He asked you to fast, and so you sacrificed and fasted. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is now willing, and this is why ulama say that dua throughout the fasting day is important, but more specifically at the time of iftar. Because everyone is occupied with what? Breaking their fast. In that time, if you make dua, you break your fast, but you make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Some say just prior to breaking the fast, the time between Asr and Maghrib, and ideally just before Maghrib. And others say actually at the time of breaking the fast, because you have completed the day now, you have broken the fast. So at the time, make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for the dua will be accepted. But this hadith implies that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves the act of fasting from His servant, that it is more, that the smell of the faster's mouth is sweeter to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Almighty, than the smell of musk. And then a further hadith, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam states, all of man's deeds are rewarded tenfold up to 700 times. Any good deed you do as a Muslim, any good deed we do, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala multiplies minimum, the promise is by 10. When you make an intention to do a good deed, Allah grants you the reward for that good deed, one reward. When you have completed the good deed, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala multiplies it by 10 minimum, 700 possible, depending on your level of sincerity. So you will have a person who gives £1 in sadaqah, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will multiply it by 700. And 700 is specifically mentioned for sadaqah. And sadaqah is extremely important in the month of Ramadan, because Rasulullah was most generous in the month of Ramadan. But anyway, by 700, this is a person who has given £1 in sadaqah. But that can also be multiplied further depending on that person's circumstances and that person's intention and sincerity. So let's say, for example, I have £10 in my pocket that I own, and I've given 10% of what I own, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grants me the reward multiplied by 700. Imagine another person who only has that £1. How much more is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala going to, the reward will not be equal, because the sacrifice is greater. So Allah does not look at what you give. Allah Azza wa Jal looks at a wholesome approach. Right? He looks at what you are sacrificing, and with what intention you are sacrificing. So if you are seeking to protect yourself from the punishment of Allah, this is one intention. You are seeking the reward and the bounties of paradise, this is another intention. You are seeking to please Allah and to gain the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is the highest of all intentions. But anyway, the hadith goes, all of man's good deeds are rewarded tenfold up to 700 times. Allah the Almighty says, except for fasting, it is for me, and I alone will reward the faster who abandons his desires and food for my sake. So there is no mention of a certain amount of reward for fasting. Allah Azza wa Jal says that the fasting is exclusive to me, that the believing servant gives up his food and drink only for my sake. And ulama have explained this hadith. The first one is that only Allah knows if you are truly fasting. Nobody else knows what you are doing in private and behind closed doors. Everybody can see whether you are praying or not, whether you're paying zakat or not, whether you're going for hajj or not. But nobody truly knows whether you are fasting or not. Only Allah knows. This is one possible meaning. The other is that fasting is an act of worship that is performed only for the sake of Allah. Like for example, prostration. There are people who prostrate to statues, and they bow and prostrate to important people, kings, and so on and so forth. There are people who perform pilgrimage to other places with other intentions, not to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not for the sake of Allah Azza wa Jal. But fasting, it is only done by those who believe in Allah, and it is only done for the sake of Allah. And in it, Rasulullah says, "Huwa shahru sabr." It is the month of patience. Patience is 3 different levels. One is the discipline to fulfill the commandments of Allah. It requires patience, because you don't always want to pray. You don't always want to pay your zakah. You don't always want to fast. Right? So disciplining yourself that you fulfill the command of Allah whether you want to or you don't, whether you feel like it or you don't. This requires patience, steadfastness, to be firm, regardless of the emotion, regardless of the feeling, regardless of the circumstances that you are going through. And then to stay away from sin, this is a different form of patience. Restraint, to stop yourself from fulfilling your desire, something that you want, but you know it is displeasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Second type of category of patience. And then the third category is to remain firm in the face of difficulties and challenges. And so when you are fasting, you get the odd headache, you feel low energy, so on and so forth. So going through that is all exercising patience. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam states, or rather Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِنَّمَا يُوَفَّى الصَّابِرُونَ أَجْرَهُمْ بِغَيْرِ حِسَابٍ. That those who are patient, their reward knows no bounds, no limits. And so this is why the afflictions and the difficulties in our lives are actually blessings from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As long as we stay focused and they draw us closer to Allah. Often we get this question that I'm going through all of this hardship, all of this difficulty, all of these things wrong in my life. Is this a punishment from Allah? What is it? And so if it is drawing me away from Allah, then it is definitely a punishment. Because anything that draws you away from Allah is a punishment, even if it comes in the guise or in the form of a pleasurable thing. Right? You made £1 million, it's driven you away from, you were praying salah before you became a millionaire, you're no longer praying salah. This is a punishment. It's not a blessing. It cannot be a blessing, because it's deprived you from the most essential thing in your life, which is your relationship with Allah. You get cancer, maybe you weren't so punctual with your prayers before, maybe you weren't so committed to deen before. You've got cancer now you are praying on time, now you are more committed, you are worshipping more. This is a blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is not a punishment. And then the reward that Allah grants for patience is far greater than the reward He grants for other forms of worship. Why? Because when you are praying, you are gaining something, right? Through your prayer, you get this sense of comfort, that you have a greater being that is taking care of, that has solution for all of your problems, right? It relieves some of the stress if you are praying in the right way. When you are giving zakat, or you are giving a charity, or you are serving a human being, you get a sense of satisfaction, because you can see the good that you are doing. You can see that that person is happy, that person's need is fulfilled. And so you get some satisfaction. From all acts of worship, there is always some enjoyment spiritually for the person who is doing an act of worship. But when you are going through difficulty and hardship, you have nothing. You gain nothing. And actually, within yourself, you don't want to be in that situation. If you could, you would change that situation. And so this is why the reward for this is unlimited. And so in order to gain all of these merits, and these are not exclusive only to the righteous and to the saints, right? It is available for everyone. And as a great scholar has said, that when we read stories of Sahaba, righteous predecessors, great scholars, even amongst ourselves, the people that we see are committed, they were not born in that state. The only thing is that they concentrated their efforts in order to acquire the benefits or the blessings of the hereafter. And we are concentrating our efforts only to gain the rewards of this world. That is the difference. It is not that they are born with a silver spoon, so to say, or they are angelic in some way, or that they don't have any desires to commit sin, or no desire for material and wealth. No, actually, they have all of that, but they have just concentrated their efforts and dedicated themselves to seeking that which is everlasting, the pleasure of Allah, the love of Allah, and paradise over this worldly life. And they are still living in this world as we are, fulfilling their needs and the necessities. And so with these things in mind, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us to make the most of this blessed month, inshallah tabaraka wa ta'ala, to make it better than any other Ramadan, previous Ramadan, bi'idhnillah ta'ala, to acquire forgiveness and mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and deliverance from hellfire. أقول ما تسمعون وأستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين من كل ذنب فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. الحمد لله وحده والصلاة والسلام على من لا نبي بعده إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم وبارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم في العالمين إنك حميد مجيد ربنا ظلمنا أنفسنا وإن لم تغفر لنا وترحمنا لنكونن من الخاسرين رب اغفر وارحم وأنت خير الراحمين ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار ربنا هب لنا من أزواجنا وذرياتنا قرة أعين واجعلنا للمتقين إماما اللهم أرنا الحق حقا وارزقنا اتباعه وأرنا الباطل باطلا وارزقنا اجتنابه اللهم اغفر للمؤمنين والمؤمنات والمسلمين والمسلمات الأحياء منهم والأموات إنك سميع قريب مجيب الدعوات وصل اللهم على محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين عباد الله رحمكم الله إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون اذكروا الله يذكركم ادعوه يستجب لكم ولذكر الله أكبر والله يعلم ما تصنعون